Comment where you're watching from today, as we share a story that proves sometimes the smallest moments can lead to the biggest changes, and that true character is revealed not in how we treat those above us, but in how we respond to those who seem to have less. On a quiet Tuesday evening at the Westbrook Diner in Chicago, Sarah Mitchell was nearing the end of another exhausting double shift. The small family restaurant, with its worn leather booths and slightly faded decor, had seen better days, but it was a place where regular customers could still find honest food and friendly service at prices they could afford. Sarah had been working there for 3 years, ever since her husband's medical bills had forced them into bankruptcy. At 32, with 2 young children at home and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow no matter how many extra shifts she took, she had learned to hide her exhaustion behind a professional smile. The evening rush had died down, leaving only a few regulars nursing their coffee cups when the bell above the door chimed. Sarah glanced up to see a tall man in a simple black hoodie and jeans enter, his baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Something about his presence commanded attention, though he moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to avoiding it. What Sarah didn't know was that Michael Jordan had chosen this small diner specifically for its anonymity. After a long day of business meetings, he wanted nothing more than a quiet meal away from the usual fanfare that accompanied his public appearances. The basketball legend took a seat in a corner booth, away from the windows and the few remaining customers. Sarah approached with her usual professional demeanor, though her feet ached from 12 hours of walking on worn tile floors. "Welcome to Westbrook Diner," she began, setting down a menu and reaching for her order pad. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Jordan looked up briefly, his expression friendly but reserved. "Just water for now, thank you." His voice was quiet, measured, carrying none of the authority that had commanded basketball courts and boardrooms. As Sarah turned to get his water, another customer entered, Richard Thompson, a local real estate developer known for his flashy suits and equally flashy personality. He was a semi-regular at the diner, though his generous tips never quite made up for his condescending attitude. "Sarah, darling." Thompson's voice carried across the quiet diner. "Surely you have a better table for me than this?" He gestured dismissively at the empty booth Sarah had started to lead him toward. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but you're welcome to sit wherever you'd like," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional tone despite her growing weariness. Thompson chose a booth near Jordan's, though he seemed oblivious to the quiet man in the corner. As he settled in, he began his usual routine of loud phone calls and demanding service, his voice carrying through the previously peaceful atmosphere. "Sarah," he called out as she delivered Jordan's water, "you know I need my coffee right away. And make sure it's fresh this time. Last week's was barely drinkable." Sarah nodded, turning to head back to the kitchen. As she passed the service station, she couldn't help but whisper to Jenny, another waitress, "I hate rich people. They think money gives them the right to treat everyone else like dirt." What she didn't realize was that Jordan, with the same sharp hearing that had helped him anticipate opponents' moves on the court, had caught her quiet words. But instead of taking offense, he found himself intrigued. There was something in her tone that spoke not of envy or spite, but of exhaustion and frustration with genuine disrespect. As the evening progressed, Thompson continued his performance of self-importance, sending his coffee back twice and making increasingly demanding requests. "Sarah, surely you can find me something better than what's on this menu. Don't you have any specials for your premium customers?" Sarah maintained her composure, though Jordan could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped her order pad a little tighter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but everyone gets the same menu. That's what makes us a diner." "Well, that's the problem with places like this, isn't it?" Thompson replied loudly. "No understanding of customer service. No appreciation for those of us who actually have taste and means." Jordan watched as Sarah absorbed the insult with practiced patience. He noticed how she automatically refilled coffee cups before they were empty, how she remembered each regular customer's preferences, how she maintained her dignity despite Thompson's attempts to diminish it. When it came time to order, Jordan kept it simple, a burger and fries, nothing fancy. But he watched how Sarah handled each interaction, how she treated every customer with the same respect regardless of their behavior or apparent status. Thompson, meanwhile, continued his performance. You know, Sarah, if you ever want to see how real restaurants treat their customers, I could take you to some proper establishments. Show you how the other half lives. His tone made it clear this wasn't a genuine offer but another way to emphasize the social distance between them. Sarah's response was professional but firm. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but I'm quite happy here. We may not be fancy, but we treat everyone with respect. The subtle emphasis on everyone wasn't lost on Jordan, who found himself increasingly impressed by the waitress's quiet dignity. He watched as she navigated Thompson's continued attempts to assert his superiority, never losing her composure but never surrendering her self-respect. As the evening wore on, Thompson's behavior grew more obnoxious. He made a show of examining his water glass for spots, loudly commented on the quaint nature of the diner's decor, and continued to treat Sarah as if she were somehow less than human. What he didn't notice was how the other customers reacted, the subtle looks of disapproval, the way regulars made a point of being extra kind to Sarah when she passed their tables. There was a community here, an understanding of mutual respect that Thompson's money couldn't buy. Jordan's food arrived without fanfare, exactly as ordered. Sarah set it down with the same care and attention she showed to every table, not realizing she was serving one of the most famous athletes in history. As he ate, Jordan couldn't help but notice more details about Sarah, the worn but clean uniform, the way she discreetly stretched her back when she thought no one was watching, the genuine warmth in her interactions with regular customers who treated her with respect. Thompson's voice cut through the diner again. Sarah, when you're done chatting with the regulars, some of us would appreciate actual service. And this time, try to bring me coffee that doesn't taste like it was made last week. Jordan watched as Sarah took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and moved to handle yet another of Thompson's demands. Her quiet dignity in the face of such persistent disrespect struck a chord with him. What happened next would not only change Sarah's life but would teach Thompson and everyone else in the diner a powerful lesson about true worth and the nature of respect. But for now, Jordan simply observed, formulating a plan that would transform this ordinary evening into something extraordinary. The basketball legend reached for his napkin, pulling out a pen from his pocket. What he wrote would soon become a message that would circulate across social media and news outlets, not because of who he was, but because of what it represented about character, dignity, and the true measure of a person's worth. The evening at Westbrook Diner continued to unfold like a carefully choreographed dance of contrasts. In one corner, Thompson maintained his performance of self-importance, each demand and complaint designed to remind everyone of his perceived status. In another, Michael Jordan sat quietly observing, his presence still unrecognized, his mind working on something far more significant than a simple meal. Sarah continued her rounds, managing Thompson's increasingly demanding behavior with practiced grace. When he complained about the temperature of his coffee for the third time, she simply replaced it without comment, though Jordan noticed the slight tremor in her hands that betrayed her exhaustion. "You know," Thompson announced loudly to no one in particular, "it's sad what's happened to customer service these days. When I was growing up, people in service jobs knew their place. They showed proper appreciation for success." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several regular customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces showing a mixture of embarrassment and anger on Sarah's behalf. But it was Jordan's reaction that would soon prove most significant. The basketball legend had spent his career reading people, understanding the subtle dynamics that could make or break a team. What he saw now was more than just a wealthy man being rude to a waitress, it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what success and dignity truly meant. As Sarah passed his table, Jordan spoke for the first time since ordering. His voice was quiet but carried a natural authority that made her pause. "How long have you worked here?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Most customers, especially at this hour, preferred minimal interaction. 3 years, she replied, then added without thinking, "ever since the medical bills." She caught herself, but Jordan's expression encouraged her to continue. For some reason she couldn't explain, she found herself telling this quiet stranger about her husband's illness, the bankruptcy that followed, and her determination to provide for her 2 children despite the challenges. What she didn't notice was how intently Jordan listened, his eyes taking in not just her words but the strength behind them. Thompson's voice interrupted again, demanding another coffee refill, but for that brief moment, Sarah had felt truly seen. Jordan pulled out his phone, seemingly checking messages, but his fingers moved with purpose as he typed something. Whatever he was writing, his expression suggested it was far more important than a simple text message. Meanwhile, Thompson had launched into another monologue about his latest real estate development, his voice pitched to carry throughout the diner. That's the problem with people today, no ambition. They're content to stay in dead-end jobs, serving those of us who actually made something of ourselves. Sarah's face remained professionally neutral, but Jordan saw how the words hit home. He knew something about ambition, about the drive to succeed, but he also understood that true success wasn't measured by how you treated those you wanted to impress, but by how you treated those who could do nothing for you. The basketball legend reached for his napkin again, the pen moving across its surface with deliberate strokes. What he wrote wasn't just a message, it was a reminder about the true nature of dignity and success. As the evening progressed, Thompson's behavior grew more theatrical. He made a show of examining his silverware for water spots, loudly discussed his recent luxury car purchase, and continued to treat Sarah as if she were somehow less than human. "You see," he announced to the diner at large, "this is why places like this struggle. No understanding of excellence, no appreciation for those of us who've achieved real success. Sarah, darling, you really should consider a career change. I could tell you stories about real success." Jordan's pen moved faster now, adding something to his note. His expression remained calm, but there was an intensity in his movements that suggested purpose rather than anger. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just Sarah's life, but the very atmosphere of the Westbrook diner. As Sarah approached to clear his plate, Jordan folded the napkin carefully and placed it beside his empty water glass. "Could I get my check, please?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, reaching for her order pad, but Jordan continued, "And could you do me a favor? Don't read what's on that napkin until after I've left." There was something in his voice that made Sarah take notice, not authority exactly, but a kind of quiet certainty that commanded attention. She found herself nodding again, curiosity mixing with the exhaustion that had been her constant companion during the double shift. As Jordan stood to leave, his movement caught Thompson's attention for the first time. Something about the tall man's presence made the real estate developer pause in his latest complaint, though he couldn't quite say why. Jordan moved toward the door with the same quiet confidence he'd shown upon entering. But before leaving, he stopped at Thompson's table. The real estate developer looked up, irritation at the interruption clear on his face. "You know," Jordan said, his voice carrying just far enough to reach nearby tables, "I've learned that true success isn't about how much money you make or how many people you can look down on. It's about understanding that every person has dignity, every job has value, and every interaction is an opportunity to show who you really are." Thompson's face registered confusion, then shock as something about the stranger's voice triggered a memory. But before he could respond, Jordan had turned and walked out into the Chicago night, the bell above the door chiming softly in his wake. Sarah stood at her station, the folded napkin now feeling like it carried the weight of something far more significant than a simple note. Around her, the diner had grown quiet, the regular customers sensing that something important had just happened, though none of them could say exactly what. Even Thompson seemed subdued, his usual bravado diminished by the brief interaction with the stranger who had spoken with such quiet authority. He reached for his coffee cup but didn't complain about its temperature. The napkin sat on Jordan's table, innocent in appearance but holding words that would soon circulate across social media and news outlets, not because of their author's fame, but because of the truth they contained about success, dignity, and the real measure of a person's worth. Sarah approached the table slowly, her hands surprisingly steady as she reached for the folded napkin. The diner seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of clinking dishes and quiet conversations fading into background noise. What she was about to read would not only change her life but would teach everyone present a powerful lesson about the true nature of success and the dignity inherent in every person, regardless of their job or social status. As she unfolded the napkin, her eyes widened slightly, then filled with tears. But these weren't tears of sadness or frustration, they were tears of recognition, of being truly seen and valued for who she was and how she carried herself. The evening was far from over, and the full impact of Jordan's visit was yet to be felt. But in that moment, as Sarah stood holding a simple napkin with an extraordinary message, something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of the Westbrook Diner. Thompson watched from his booth, his usual certainty about his place in the world suddenly less secure. He had spent the evening proclaiming his success, but now he found himself wondering if perhaps he had misunderstood what success really meant. The regular customers who had witnessed the entire evening unfold waited quietly, understanding that they were present for something significant, though they didn't yet know exactly what. The note Sarah held would soon reveal not just its author's identity, but a truth about dignity and respect that would resonate far beyond the walls of this small diner. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the napkin, the diner around her silent with anticipation. As she read the message, her eyes widened, and she had to steady herself against the table. Written in clear, confident handwriting was a message that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone who would soon hear about it. "Dear Sarah," the note began, "I've spent my life around people who claim to understand success. Tonight, I watched you demonstrate what real success looks like: dignity under pressure, respect for all, and strength that doesn't need to diminish others to prove itself. You mentioned hating rich people, but I hope this changes your mind about at least one of them." The note was signed Michael Jordan, and beneath the signature was something that made Sarah's breath catch: a check for $100,000, along with a phone number and an additional message: "Call this number tomorrow. I have a proposition about your children's future." Thompson, who had been watching Sarah's reaction with mild curiosity, suddenly sat up straighter. "Did you say Michael Jordan? That was Michael Jordan?" His voice had lost its usual condescending tone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. The other customers in the diner began to murmur as the news spread. Jenny, the other waitress, rushed over to look at the note, her eyes growing wide as she recognized the signature. "Oh my God, Sarah. That was really him. And he was here listening to everything." The implications of the evening's events began to sink in. Thompson, who had spent hours loudly proclaiming his own success and importance, had been unknowingly performing his arrogance in front of one of the most successful athletes and businessmen in history. But Jordan's note wasn't finished. There was a second napkin, folded beneath the first, with a message addressed to the diner at large: "Success isn't about how much money you have or how many people you can look down on. It's about understanding that every person has value, every job has dignity, and true character is revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you." As Jenny read this second message aloud, the diner erupted in conversation. Regular customers who had witnessed the entire evening unfold began sharing their observations, piecing together the subtle ways Jordan had observed and evaluated the situation before making his move. Thompson sat in his booth, his face a mixture of emotions: embarrassment, regret, and the dawning realization that he had spent the evening proving exactly the opposite of what he had intended about success and class. Sarah's hands were still shaking, but now it was with a different kind of emotion. The money was life-changing, certainly, but it was Jordan's words about dignity and success that brought tears to her eyes. For years, she had done her job with pride despite how some customers treated her, and now someone she had never met had not only noticed but had validated her approach to life. The door chimed again, and two more people entered the diner, a man and a woman in business attire, carrying folders. They headed straight for Sarah, introducing themselves as representatives from Jordan's business office. "Mr. Jordan asked us to ensure everything is handled properly," the woman explained, her manner professional but kind. "He was quite impressed with what he observed this evening, and he wants to make sure his intentions are carried out correctly." What followed was a conversation that transformed Sarah's future. The check, it turned out, was just the beginning. Jordan had made arrangements for a trust to be set up for her children's education, ensuring they would have opportunities she had only dreamed of providing. But there was more. Jordan's representatives explained that he had been looking for someone to manage a new community outreach program through his organization, someone who understood both service and dignity, who could teach others about true success and respect. "He said he's been interviewing people for weeks," the male representative explained, but tonight he watched you handle repeated disrespect with grace and professionalism. He said that's exactly the kind of character he's been looking for. Thompson, still sitting in his booth, couldn't help but overhear the conversation. His coffee sat untouched as he listened to the representatives outline a future for Sarah that would completely change her life, a future made possible because of how she had handled his own poor behavior. The regular customers, many of whom had witnessed Sarah's quiet dignity over the years, began sharing stories of their own experiences with her kindness and professionalism. Each tale added to the portrait of someone who had demonstrated true success long before any financial reward was possible. Jenny brought over Sarah's other table's checks, insisting on covering for her while she spoke with Jordan's representatives. The gesture was small but significant, a show of support from someone who had witnessed both Sarah's struggles and her unwavering dignity. As the representatives continued explaining the details of Jordan's offers, something remarkable began to happen in the diner. Other customers started approaching Thompson's table, quietly but firmly sharing their own observations about his behavior and its contrast with Sarah's professionalism. The real estate developer, who had spent the evening proclaiming his own importance, found himself face to face with the reality of how others perceived his behavior. But more significantly, he was witnessing the truth about success that Jordan's note had proclaimed, that it's revealed in character, not proclamation. Sarah sat with the representatives, her professional composure maintained even in the face of life-changing news. She asked thoughtful questions about the community outreach program, demonstrating the same care and attention to detail she had shown in her waitressing duties. The evening had transformed the Westbrook Diner into something more than just a restaurant. It had become a stage for a powerful lesson about success, dignity, and the true measure of character. The regular customers, the staff, even Thompson himself had been part of a demonstration of principles that went far beyond financial success. As Jordan's representatives finished their explanation of the opportunities being offered, Sarah finally allowed herself a moment to fully process what had happened. Her quiet whisper about hating rich people had been overheard by someone who could have taken offense. Instead, he had recognized the frustration behind her words and responded not with anger but with understanding and opportunity. The representatives explained that Jordan wanted to meet with her properly the next day to discuss the details of the community outreach position. He said he's never seen someone handle difficult situations with such consistent grace, the woman explained. He believes you have much to teach others about true dignity and success. Thompson, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally stood to leave. But instead of his usual dramatic exit, he approached Sarah's table. His voice, when he spoke, had lost its condescending tone. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I spent the evening talking about success, but I was actually demonstrating its opposite. Thank you for showing me what real class looks like. The sincerity in his voice suggested that Jordan's lesson had reached at least one person. The regular customers watched this interaction with interest, witnessing the beginning of what could be a genuine transformation. As the night drew to a close, the story of what had happened at the Westbrook Diner was already beginning to spread. Customers were sharing the experience on social media, describing not just Jordan's generosity but the larger lesson about success and dignity that had played out before their eyes. But for Sarah, the most meaningful part wasn't the money or even the job opportunity. It was the validation of how she had chosen to live her life, treating every person with respect regardless of how they treated her. Jordan's note had recognized and celebrated the very qualities she had sometimes doubted were worth maintaining. The evening was ending, but its impact was just beginning to unfold. What had started with a whispered complaint about rich people had led to a powerful demonstration of what true wealth and success really meant. 6 months after Michael Jordan's unexpected visit to the Westbrook Diner, the small restaurant had become something of a local landmark. People would come from all over Chicago, hoping to sit in what had become known as the Jordan booth, but they found something more meaningful than just a celebrity connection. The diner itself had undergone subtle but significant changes. Not in its appearance, it still maintained its comfortable, unpretentious atmosphere, but in the way people treated each other within its walls. Jordan's message about dignity and respect had transformed not just lives but the very culture of the place. Sarah Mitchell, though no longer waiting tables, was still a regular presence at the diner. Her new position as Director of Community Outreach for Jordan's organization had her traveling around the city, speaking to groups about dignity in service and the true meaning of success. But she made a point of having breakfast at Westbrook every morning, often sitting in the same booth where Jordan had written the note that changed her life. Thompson, the real estate developer whose behavior had provided such a stark contrast to Sarah's dignity, had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation. He still came to the diner regularly, but now he was known for his courtesy and generosity. The man who had once berated servers about coffee temperature had become an advocate for treating service workers with respect. On this particular morning, the diner was hosting a special event, the launch of the Dignity Initiative, a program Sarah had developed through Jordan's organization. The basketball legend himself had returned for the occasion, this time not in disguise but openly present to support the message he had first delivered on a napkin. 6 months ago, Sarah began addressing the gathered crowd of media, community leaders, and regular customers. I whispered words of frustration about rich people, never imagining that someone like Michael Jordan would not only hear them but respond with such extraordinary kindness and wisdom. Jordan, sitting quietly in his former booth, nodded in acknowledgement. His presence was commanding but understated, his focus clearly on the message rather than himself. But what Mr. Jordan gave me wasn't just money or opportunity, Sarah continued. He gave me validation for something I had always believed but sometimes struggled to maintain, that true dignity isn't about what you have, but how you treat others. The Dignity Initiative she was launching would provide educational scholarships for service industry workers and their children, but it went beyond just financial assistance. It included mentorship programs, professional development opportunities, and perhaps most importantly, advocacy for better treatment of service workers. Thompson had become one of the program's most passionate supporters. Standing now to address the gathering, his transformation was evident in every word he spoke. I used to think success was about showing others how important you are, he admitted. Thanks to Mr. Jordan's lesson and Sarah's example, I've learned that true success is about lifting others up, not pushing them down. The real estate developer had put his money where his mouth was, becoming one of the initiative's major donors and using his business connections to create opportunities for others. His own employees spoke of how differently he treated them now, how his entire approach to business had shifted. Jenny, the waitress who had witnessed everything that first night, still worked at the diner. But now she was also enrolled in college courses, her tuition covered by the initiative's scholarship program. She served coffee during the event with the same professional pride that had always characterized the diner's staff. As Jordan took the podium, the room fell silent. The man known for his competitive intensity on the basketball court spoke with quiet authority about what he had witnessed that night 6 months ago. I've achieved what many would call success, he said, his voice carrying easily through the diner. But that evening, I saw something more valuable than any championship ring or business deal. I saw dignity in action, demonstrated not through words but through consistent choices in difficult circumstances. He gestured to Sarah, who sat with her 2 children, both now enrolled in top private schools thanks to the trust Jordan had established. Success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about how you help others achieve their potential. The impact of that one evening had rippled far beyond the walls of the Westbrook diner. Other restaurants had adopted the initiative's principles, creating better working conditions and opportunities for their staff. Business schools had begun incorporating lessons about dignity in service into their curricula, using the story of what happened that night as a case study in true leadership. But perhaps the most meaningful change was visible in the small, daily interactions that took place within the diner itself. Customers who had once barely acknowledged their servers now engaged with them as people. Tips had increased, but more importantly, so had basic human respect. Sarah's children, present for the event, had learned their own powerful lessons about dignity and success. Her daughter, now 12, had written a school essay about that night that had gone viral on social media. My mom taught me that real wealth isn't in your wallet, it's in how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. As the event continued, Jordan shared something he hadn't revealed before. I choose diners like this one regularly, he explained, places where I can observe without being recognized. That night, I wasn't just looking for a quiet meal, I was looking for someone to lead this initiative, someone who demonstrated the principles we're celebrating today. The basketball legend's words carried extra weight as he continued. What I witnessed was more than just good service. I saw someone maintaining their dignity in the face of disrespect, showing what real success looks like when all the external trappings are stripped away. Thompson, listening from his usual booth, nodded in understanding. His own journey from arrogant customer to advocate for respect had become part of the story, proving that change was possible when people were willing to learn from their mistakes. The morning's event concluded with the announcement of the initiative's expansion to other cities, carrying the message of dignity and respect beyond Chicago. But the Westbrook Diner would remain its spiritual home, a place where the principles of true success were demonstrated daily. As the crowd began to disperse, Jordan took a moment to sit in his old booth, now marked with a small plaque. Sarah joined him, their conversation a quiet reminder of how much had changed since that first encounter. "You know," Jordan said, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had achieved the highest levels of success, "some people never learn that real power isn't in how many people you can look down on, but in how many you can lift up." Sarah nodded, understanding deeply what he meant. Her own journey had taught her that success wasn't about escaping service but about transforming how society viewed and valued it. The diner had returned to its normal routine by lunchtime, but something permanent had shifted in its atmosphere. The lessons of that night 6 months ago had become part of its DNA, transforming it from a simple restaurant into a living example of how dignity and respect could change lives. As the day drew to a close, Sarah stood for a moment in the spot where she had once whispered her frustration about rich people. The words that had sparked such extraordinary change now seemed like artifacts from a different life. What remained was a deeper understanding of success and dignity, and a commitment to sharing that understanding with others. The note that had changed her life was now framed on the diner's wall, its message continuing to inspire everyone who read it. True success isn't measured by how much money you have or how many people you can look down on. It's measured by how you treat others, especially those who can do nothing for you. In that measure, you are one of the most successful people I've ever met. The story of the Westbrook Diner had become more than just a tale of unexpected generosity. It had become a lesson about the true nature of dignity, success, and the power of treating every person with respect, regardless of their position in life.